You're listening to part 3 of Academy FM's Grassroots project, funded by the Grassroots Fund through the Kent Community Foundation. The project takes young people from Folkestone who are either in education or unemployed and shows them some of the environment around Folkestone. For this trip, we visited one of the biggest and most varied farms in the area, and we met Kim Gower, who runs the farm with the rest of her family. The trip was led by Dave Sharp from Academy FM, who you will hear after some of us give introductions to the piece.
Hi, I'm Deanna Boxall and we're at a farm.
What's at the farm today?
There's cows, there's loads of there's like 3 sheep, potatoes.
So it's a mixed farm?
Yeah.
Potatoes. I just love them.
The reason that we've come to this farm today is because a lot of people who live in Folkestone, and I suppose other urban areas and other towns, don't have an idea of what happens in the countryside around. Now, we actually live in what is quite a rural area. By that I mean, in East Kent, a lot of it is still farmland and fields rather than built-up areas like central Folkestone, which we all know. But a lot of the area is fields, and we don't really have much clue about what happens in the farming community and what is grown and how it's grown and how people keep animals and what the process is for keeping them and managing them and making money out of them. Because one of the things that farmers have to do to survive is to actually run their farms at a profit. Now, the situation at the moment is, and I'm sure Kim will talk about this later, is it's quite difficult for farmers because you'll know that when you go into the supermarket, they've got loads of offers on for any sort of meat or fruit or veg. And it means that it's good for the consumer because it's quite cheap, but it means it's very difficult for farmers to survive now because running a massive organisation like this farm with all this machinery and all the animals and the crops and so on takes a lot of money. And what it means is that increasingly over the last 10, 15 years, the amount of food in our supermarkets doesn't come from British farms. You're eating food that might come from somewhere in Europe. Even the milk that you drink might have come from Poland rather than British cows. Farmers are having quite a difficult time, but they're a very important part of our local community in East Kent because so much of the area around here is farmland. And so what Kim is going to do now is give us an introduction to a farm like this, which handles all sorts of stuff. They kind of specialise, I believe, in potatoes. I can see a big pile of potatoes over in a barn over there, and I know we've eaten many of Kim's potatoes in the past, which are fantastic. And very good value, actually. But also they do other stuff as well, and they've got cows and so on the farm. And I'll hand over to Kim and let her tell you about the farm.
Hi, good morning. So this is a mixed farm, which means that we have animals as well as crops, and that's quite unusual now. If you go back 50 years or more, all farms were mixed because it made sense for everybody to keep animals and then to grow crops to feed them, and it was a cycle that was important. But nowadays less and less farms are mixed because farms are now encouraged to specialise in one thing and to be bigger and bigger and bigger. So by a mixed farm I mean that we have beef cattle, but we grow arable crops. So we grow wheat, we grow oilseed rape, we grow beans, and also, as Dave pointed out, we grow potatoes. Farming, of course, can be a very physical and quite a mucky job. You know, Wellington boots, getting mucky, getting dirty, as quite often farm jobs are. But at the other end of the scale, we also have to be aware that farming, like many other businesses, is a sophisticated business. So by that I mean that our prices that we get, mainly for our arable crops, are affected by the international market. So we might be mucky in the morning, feeding animals and tending to them, but at the same time during that day I might have to look on the computer and I'll look at what the futures markets are doing because that affects the price of our wheat. So that makes it quite interesting. There aren't many other businesses where you're doing physical work, but also you are looking at stock markets, for example.
The first crop we saw is a type of bean. However, you won't find them in the shops because they're exported all the way to Egypt.
But these flowers will turn into the bean. And then when that bean is ready, we will harvest it. So when you see in the supermarket like dried chickpeas and things, that's what it will look like. It would be wonderful if all of the grain and the crops we grew in this country stayed in this country, but it doesn't work like that. You know, we all import and export, and that's great in some ways, and in another way it's quite sad because, as Dave was saying at the beginning, you know, you're going to go to a dairy farm, produce fantastic milk, but will you be able to buy it in the supermarket, or did it come from Poland? Yeah. So that's a drawback of globalisation. If you do a bit of shopping with your mum or your dad anytime, look for the little tractor sign on produce, and that shows that it's been grown in this country.
Then we went into a big barn that was full of tractors and farm machinery. We didn't realise how much it all cost.
We're just going into the room to go look at the tractors now.
This tractor we bought last year was £80,000. So that's the thing. If you have a big farm, it's great, but your expenses are very, very high. So there's our combine, and that really needs replacing, we think, in the next year or so. But yes, combines, you are looking at a couple of £100,000. So expenses are high. My husband last night was spraying the crops. He was spraying the beans. They have to be sprayed to stop them getting disease, to stop insects attacking them. But sprays are hugely expensive. So when our spray bills come in, they are tens of thousands of pounds. Last night, my husband sprayed the beans, and this is a very important point I want you all to remember. He went and started spraying at 9 o'clock in the evening until midnight. Why do you think he sprayed at night time?
Isn't it because all the bugs and insects are sleeping?
Bees are critical to crops. If we don't have bees, we don't get crops. If we don't have crops, we don't have food. And you may have heard that bees are in decline. And we have to really, really look after the bees that we've got. So when we spray a crop like beans, which have flowers, and they're very, very attractive to bees, we wait till the bees go to sleep. So the bees go off and go to sleep at about dusk, 8, 8:30. So we will only spray crops that have bees on them when the bees have left and gone to bed, because we don't want to kill them.
Why do you have so many tractors?
Yeah, it's a question I keep asking my husband, because I don't really think we need this many tractors. Tractors have to do a lot of different jobs. So although to somebody who doesn't work on a farm, they all look the same. They actually have different powered engines. They can pull different things. So they do a number of different jobs.
How comes people just don't invent one tractor that can have all different, like, sowing and ploughing just fitted onto it?
Good point. Sometimes you can get multi-purpose tractors, but for the big jobs like drilling and spraying, they have to be separate machines because they're also done at separate times. But tractors are now very, very sophisticated, so new tractors all have touchscreen computers inside.
Oh, wow.
And GPS, absolutely, you know your stuff. So that, for example, in, let's say, Canada, where they grow a massive amount of wheat and have millions of acres of wheat fields, the huge tractors that they use over there and combines, a man sits in them, but he does nothing. He's just there as a little bit of security because the whole machine is driven by satellite, not by a man.
What's that big thing on the back of that
That's
tractor?
a baler. That's for baling, which is a job that we're doing at the moment, actually. So before you start harvesting your crops, you harvest your grass. We let fields grow grass long, and that becomes hay. So there's a big difference. Anybody who maybe has ever been horse riding or had to help with horses will understand the difference between hay and straw. So hay is dried grass, and we bale that, and then animals eat it. Straw is the waste product from the grain. So all the grain we keep and all the straw falls on the field behind, and we bale that, and straw is for bedding, animal bedding. So that is to bale.
Because tractors and other machinery can do so many things, modern farms only need a few people working on them. Most of the jobs on Kim's farm are done by her family, but in the past it would have been different.
If we went back 50 years, a farm of this size probably would have had at least 12, maybe 15 workers easily. But because tractors have become sophisticated and taken the place of manual labour, we really only have 2 people for this size farm now instead of 15.
Aren't you worried that maybe one day tractors are going to rule the farms and you won't need farmers?
Yes, exactly. Well, it is going that way. That's a man sits in a tractor, but actually he's not operating it anymore. It's operated by computer and satellite. So it is quite a scary prospect. But and even animals, on massive farms where they have thousands of animals, a lot of it is run by computer. People aren't looking after them.
We then went into a barn and saw the rest of Kim's family. They were working at a conveyor belt carrying potatoes. They were put into sacks to be sold. Occasionally potatoes went by on the conveyor belt that weren't good enough to be sold, and these were put in the skip to the side.
In here we're grading potatoes. So potatoes have come out of the field and they're stored in huge boxes that I'll show you next door. But what we want to do next is to make sure that what we put in our bags to sell are all good. So they come along, as you can see here, on this little rolling conveyor. And any potatoes that have got marks, too big, too small, they're thrown out and they're dropped into this skip here. So the good potatoes go in the bags. The bags are then stitched with this machine, and then they're ready to be sold. Consumers, as we all know, are far too fussy. So anything that's got a mark on it, anything that's too big or too small, we take out because we think that probably the middlemen that we sell to, the grocers, the hotels, will probably complain because consumers are very fussy.
Having a big potato?
Yeah. So I'll show you some potatoes that have been rejected now that the cattle will benefit from. So the potatoes that we reject for people are not wasted because, you may not know this, but cattle love potatoes. They go for our cattle, and that was the pile that you saw when you came in.
Are you related to any of these?
Yes, everybody. It's a family farm. I am related to everybody in this working environment.
Kim then took us into the cold store, which was basically a barn-sized fridge where potatoes could be stored for months. She told us about how difficult it is for farms to make money.
Potatoes do not make a lot of profit, unfortunately. So if I tell you that we sell that sack, which is 25 kilos of potatoes, we sell it for £5. Now, in 1976, which is way before you were born, we had a particularly bad year of drought, and food was short because of the drought. We were selling potatoes on this farm for more money in 1976 than we sell them for today. Oh, yes. So that just shows you. Unfortunately, some things like potatoes, the price has been pushed down and down and down. That's partly because there are a lot more potatoes grown across Europe, that we trade with other countries. But it's also that consumers aren't prepared to pay a lot of money for their food. And, you know, if people aren't going to buy them because they're too expensive, then the price has to be pushed down and down and down. So we don't get very much money for potatoes, but we still do it.
Are there different kinds of potatoes?
Yeah. We grow normally about 5 different varieties of potatoes. Some are red, some are white. So I don't know if at home you see potatoes before they're cooked when their skin's on, but some potatoes are red-skinned and some are white-skinned. So we grow 5 different varieties normally. They've got lovely names. This one's called Mozart, this variety. We also grow a variety called Picasso, Marfona, Saxon, and then this year we're growing a new one called Manitou.
Like cars.
Pardon?
Aren't like Saxon and Picasso like cars and that?
Well, they're named after other people, that's right. Picasso was an artist.
Oh, yeah.
Mozart was a composer. Yes, they all have funny names, but I don't give them the funny names. That's what the people who produce the seed give them. Yeah.
What I don't get, you know, if you go to, say, Sainsbury's, you've got, like, the special Sainsbury's, like, Sainsbury's potatoes, but what's the difference between, why ain't it...
Sainsbury's will only be getting their potatoes from a farmer like me. They won't be growing their own. They'll just have a contract. They'll have an agreement with a farmer, and they'll say to that farmer, we want 2,000 tonnes of potatoes from you this year, and we will pay you this amount for them. And it's not a very high amount. Potatoes are not very expensive. And as we were saying earlier, the problem is that when Sainsbury's want to do a special offer, they will just go to the farmer and say, we're going to give you less. So your potatoes in Sainsbury's will come from a farmer like me.
How much do you send your potatoes to?
We don't, I have to say, we do not deal with any supermarket. So we sell ours to local middlemen. By middlemen, I mean grocery shops or people who've got some grocery shops, hotels, pubs. So they come along and they buy a few tonne a week. And then we also sell to the general public. So if you, we're running out now, but if you wanted some potatoes and some really good potatoes, you could drive up here with your mum and your dad and you could come and buy some from me. So we sell to the public as well.
So
at £5 a sack, is that a lot cheaper than you get in any of the supermarkets?
Completely. If I give you an example, if you wanted to buy this size of Mozart potatoes, it came to £39. But if you bought it from me, it would be £5.
Oh, big difference then.
Yeah, big difference. A very big difference, yeah.
So now we're on our way to the cattle.
We are. Very interesting. Eve asked in the minibus if she can milk one.
What?
Yeah, so she can milk a cow.
She won't let us milk a cow.
Sure.
Yes, I'm very sure.
I'll do it.
I see two very large cows, loads of hay.
I'm just off to go and talk to a cow. Hello.
It's because we've now got this system where you either have cows that only give milk or cows that are only good for beef. The problem is that it's only girl cows that can give milk.
Why?
Because just like a mother with a baby, it's the mother that produces the milk for the baby. Just the same with cows. So for a cow to produce milk, it has to have a calf. Okay?
Oh.
But the problem is then...
So if the woman, the female cow, didn't have a baby, then they wouldn't have milk?
It would be no use. So,
oh, right.
But the bigger problem is that in the farming industry at the moment, if your girl cow, which is called a heifer, has, I think we've got two in here, let's go and have a look. If she has her calf, and her calf is a girl, that's great, because that girl will grow up and she will give you milk. But if that calf is a boy, what do you do with it? And some dairy farmers will shoot calves, boy calves, because they're no use to them.
How much do you sell a cow for?
That's a very good question. At the moment, prices are very good. So last week, this is mucky, so if you don't stand too close if you want to keep your trainers clean. So last week we sold 3 cattle at market, and one of them, they're selling for about £2 a kilo live weight. So that means that the cow that we sold in money, we got about £1,400 for, which is a really good price.
How much, say you're starting a farm, how much do you normally pay for a cow?
That is a very, very good question, because until recently, it was quite economical to buy a calf or a young cow and then to grow it on like we do, feed it up. But suddenly there's a huge demand for beef. Now, this is partly because countries like India and China, which are becoming more prosperous, they want more Western-type food. So they want more beef for burgers and things like that, which they never wanted before. So suddenly people want beef, so the price has gone up. And now to buy a calf is a lot of money. My children they are only small, but to help teach them about business, they saved some money and they bought a calf each. And then they looked after that calf, and when it grew up to this size, they sold it, and they kept the money and they bought another calf. But when they bought calves this time, just a few weeks old, they had to pay £300 for a calf. If I go back 3 years, I paid for the same calves, the same size, about £50 or £70, and now we're paying £300.
After the cows, Kim took us to see the sheep. Unlike a lot of local farms which have hundreds of sheep, Kim's farm specialises in arable or vegetable crops, so she only keeps a few sheep to feed her family.
These are my 3 sheep, only mine. I only have 3. And they will also, when they're big, they will go off and they will come back and go in our freezer. But yes, we keep them and we look after them. They have a very good life, but then they will go off. They go to the abattoir. They'll be killed humanely, which is a shock to their head, and then they will be my roast lamb. Is that lamb chop? But most lambs, do you know how old most lambs go off when you want your roast lamb from the supermarket? Do you know how old they are when they go off to be killed?
6 months.
No. About 12 to 15 weeks old when they're tiny. So we could never do that. So these are my sheep, and they won't go off yet. They'll be bigger than this.
Do you get more money when they're more little or when they're more old?
Actually, you do, which is sad, if you look at the price per kilo of the meat. And again, it's consumer demands, you see. So when people go to the supermarket, they want little chops this big and they want little legs of lamb. But the truth is that if you want that, then a lamb has to go off when it's a baby to give you that meat. When my lambs come back as meat, you know, a leg of lamb is huge because they're a proper fully sized animal, and you know, we think that's fair. We would never send baby animals off. But the reality is that most of the animals you eat in the supermarkets are baby animals.
Why can't they just leave them to grow a bit and then...
Exactly.
Because the meat will be tender as well once they've grown as well.
Yeah, well, there actually is a move towards... that actually Prince Charles is somebody who campaigns about this. There is a move towards eating lamb when it's actually not a lamb, when it's older. Now,
But it's
called a hogget. When it's a year old, it's called a hogget. And then after that, it becomes mutton. And there is a small move, but championed by Prince Charles, for people to start trying to eat lamb when it's hogget or mutton when it's older.
That's the sheep eating.
Luckily, the sheep didn't eat Courtney's microphone. We learned a lot on our trip to see Kim's farm and took a sack of potatoes back to cook at home. We'd like to thank Academy FM for running the project, and the Folkestone Fund and the Kent Community Foundation for funding it. Without their help, it couldn't have happened.